Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the basics of QuickBooks Online. This training is presented by Kelly Weaver, the Regional Director of the Small Business Development Center. Just a few reminders before we get started. All participants will be muted during the training for the best sound quality. If you do have questions throughout the training, if you want to throw them into the chat and we'll get to them as Kelly has time. And then this QuickBooks training is brought to you by Grow South Dakota in partnership with the Small Business Administration and First Financial Bank USA. Again, our trainer is Kelly Weaver of the South Dakota Small Business Development Center and Grow South Dakota. So Kelly, I think this is where I hand it off to you. Oh, you're muted.
Yep, ready or not, here we go. Obviously not ready, unmuted. Oh, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I have put a few resources in the chat for you, and we'll talk about those as we go out throughout the morning. As Rachel said, I'm with the Small Business Development Center. I'm in the Aberdeen office. We have 6 offices in South Dakota. For those of you that are joining us down in the southeast corner of the state, we have offices in Yankton that cover that area, and then also in Sioux Falls. So those would be your 2 closest areas to connect with. We provide free and confidential business technical assistance. So we help people with business plans, financial projections, helping them understand the steps involved in getting involved in a business. If you're in an existing business, we can help with looking at growth opportunities. You're looking for funding to buy your building, you need some financial projections, we can help with those sort of things. So we're just here as a free resource to help small businesses in South Dakota thrive and survive and thrive. So training is one of the things we do as part of that process. And today we're going to be talking about QuickBooks, and we'll be using a QuickBooks online training platform. So we'll basically be just kind of walking through the product and kind of explaining how to get around, and then we'll actually do some transactions and walk through that process as well. If you have QuickBooks Online on your computer, I mean, you're welcome to follow along, but I find that sometimes that just takes your attention away from what's being shown or said, and it may not be as helpful as you think it is. We will have a break mid-morning, and please put your questions in the chat as we go along. We'll have time to address those as the morning goes, and for sure at the break time at the end, we'll definitely take a Q&A time at both of those spots. So with that, I am going to share my screen with the training platform here. Of course. There we go. I have too many screens open. I had to figure out which one to share. So just a little bit about what's in the chat as far as resources. There's QuickBooks Intuit's pricing page, so you can look at the different options of QuickBooks and what those prices are involved with that, along with the payroll pricing. We have a partnership with an organization that works with Intuit and can offer our SBDC contacts and clients discounts if they're starting a new QuickBooks account or if they're converting from desktop to online. So that's the discounts on new QBO accounts. Traditionally, QuickBooks also offers running discounts, usually about 30% off or maybe 50% off for 3 months. The SBDC discounts typically run at about 30% off, but for a full year. So a little bit better than the standard QuickBooks, but always check both because sometimes QuickBooks is running a better promotion, and also their promotions are maybe on more product lines than the SBDC promotion. Intuit has an awesome YouTube channel with, I don't know, close to 200 videos. A lot of them are very specific to a specific task. So if you're not finding the help you need within the platform, that's a great resource to go to. And then they also put out a, well, it used to be a newsletter. Now it's all done online, and they have a website called firmofthefuture.com. And that it's more accountant folks focused for their QuickBooks accounting firms that are using QuickBooks with their clients. But the one thing I like nice about it for any of us is it gives you a look at what's coming up or what's just newly been released. So, and there's a lot of work going on, and many of you have probably noticed it already. A lot of the AI agents, some of the automated things that it's put in there, good, bad, or otherwise, they're there, and you just have to find if they can be useful for you or not. But they talk a lot about that on this Firm of the Future website too. So just to get started, I'm speaking from the online platform. If anybody has a desktop platform, a lot of the accounting things will be relevant. The the space and getting around in the platform looks different between the two. They just are different in their looks. Even as they try to combine elements of each, they are different looks. But what happens behind the scenes, the basic accounting of it all, that has not changed. So no matter what version of QuickBooks you're using, I think you'll find some useful comments today in the class. For those of you who have not purchased QuickBooks and you're just curious, you can only buy an online version today. You can't buy a desktop version unless you're getting the very highest enterprise level, which that's not appropriate for most small startup businesses for sure. And so the thing to know about QuickBooks Online, it's a software as a service, like many other things that you work with. You access the platform via a website, so you always want to make sure you have a good internet connection. And then you also need to realize that your data is in the cloud and it's backed up. It's got good, the nice thing about it is you don't have to worry about backup or losing your data necessarily. QuickBooks is taking care of that redundancy, but that is how this feature works. You will have to buy a subscription for every company that you want to do books for. So even if you're a small business who owns your real estate personally and you're doing that on a separate tax return as maybe a partnership, and then the operating business is in a different legal entity, maybe an LLC, that's really two companies. There's no way easily or well to do the books for both under one company, even though it is kind of one company. So you're going to have to choose whether you want to get a subscription for each, or maybe on the real estate side, there's not that many transactions. You can just take care of that with an Excel spreadsheet or something. So when you create QuickBooks or when you create your account, you're generally asked a series of questions that help QuickBooks fine-tune what features are readily shown. Know that even when you answer those questions, let's just say you say, I don't track inventory. It may hide or de-emphasize inventory-related features because you told it you didn't use it. But if that changes, all you need to do is go and change that setting and those features will become available. So it's not like they go away or you have to pay extra to get them back. It's just that QuickBooks has always been very much about managing your desktop in a way that gets rid of anything that you don't need to worry about and, gets rid of the clutter, has in front of you what you need when you need it. So that's the purpose of that. The other thing to be aware of when you start QuickBooks, one of the first things it's going to prompt you to do is to connect your bank. And that's a really great feature, but it takes a little getting used to, and some people aren't always comfortable doing that right away. So even though it makes it look like that you have to do it, you do not have to do it. And you can always go back later and do it. So just be aware that they see it as a primary benefit so that all your bank transactions will feed into QuickBooks and you won't have to manually enter them. But not everybody's comfortable with that. So do with that as you wish. Another feature of QuickBooks Online is it has an accountant user. Depending on the level of QuickBooks that you purchase, you will have users, anywhere from 1 user to 5 users typically, depending on the version. But all of the versions have a free user, which is an accountant user. So if you're an individual working on your QuickBooks and you have your accountant who also is familiar with QuickBooks, you can add them as a user so that they can log into your QuickBooks and see things. And they, as far as I know, they have full edit privileges. It wasn't that way in the desktop version, but I think in the online version, then you might be able to restrict privileges also, but obviously your accountant's probably the one you want to have the most privileges because they are the ones who know how to get around and fix things that you maybe need help with. Also know that you'll see down here, there's an all apps function. QuickBooks provides a core financial software function. It has information about customers and vendors and products and services that you can keep within QuickBooks, but you might have a separate CRM software where you keep all your customer data, you do your bookings, you do your receivables and everything through there. So some of those things can connect directly to QuickBooks. If you don't have something like that, but want something like that connects to your QuickBooks, I would kind of look at the QuickBooks apps and see what is available. So you can see when I hover over all apps here, it gives me all these different options, apps under all these different areas. And then if you click on one, even this one, it gives further breakdown. There could be 50, 100, 10, and there's all kinds of different apps under each of these. So if you're looking for a solution that QuickBooks isn't quite getting there for you on, check out the apps. They might be a way to extend the features beyond the basic financials that QuickBooks provides. Those apps generally come with an additional fee. And the nice thing about the apps that are presented here are they're ones that have been vetted to work well with QuickBooks. Sometimes third-party apps say they integrate with QuickBooks, but they may not integrate well. These apps have been vetted and worked through the process with QuickBooks, so it should be a seamless process. A lot of them are still offered by third-party vendors, but they have coordinated with QuickBooks in the process. So that's another way to extend the value of this basic financial software. Also, a lot of your payment platforms like Shopify or I'm trying to think of a few others. They have pretty standard integrations with QuickBooks as well. Let's see. So I want to start and talk a little bit about the structure of QuickBooks and how you get around. That seems, especially people that are navigating to this for the first time or coming over from a desktop platform, it's like, okay, there's a lot going on here. How do I get around? And I will speak this out loud up front. It continues to change, and it has changed a lot in the last probably 6 months. And so sometimes I still find myself fumbling around about how to get around. So do not feel bad if you are not sure how to get where you need to go. What you'll find typically is there's more than one way to get where you need to go. And eventually you will find the way that fits best for you so that you can start customizing this dashboard. You'll see right over here, there's a bookmarks. So if there's places you're going regularly, you can bookmark those and then they're going to be right there for you to access. This home page is kind of where we land when we open, and you can customize that too. You can see this customize your dashboard. So if you don't want to see some of these feeds in here, or you want to move them around, or you want to add other things to it, you can do that. And so there's view all is listed here. If you hover over the three dots here, that'll give you a chance to edit how that particular card shows up. So again, feel free to work through that as you start figuring out what works best for you. You might want to just let it set or play around with it. That's probably the best option. It's like, oh, wow, I could have this show up on my dashboard every time I open it. That's great. I want that one there. I want that one at the top. But you won't know that if you don't kind of play around with it and look around. You're not going to lose any of your financial data by trying to customize this page. Also, I'm not sure if this is something that still exists, but I'm going to click up here. Yeah, so there's an accountant view and a business view. And right now it's in accountant view. And the difference really between the two is more language related. So an accounting view would talk about things more from an accounting terminology, and a business view would talk about things more from a common language perspective. For instance, an accountant view might say accounts receivable, where a business view might say people who owe me money. So same thing, just spoken in a different way. So if you find like the language is a barrier, maybe try looking at the business view, and that might ring more true with how you're trying to get around. Accounting does have its own language, so to speak. Some people are fluent and understand that, and other people, it's, especially if you're starting a new business and you've never done anything with accounting before and you're trying to figure it out for your own, you've got not enough stuff on your plate to learn. That learning in a new accounting language might not be high on the priority, but you still need to do your book. So try that business view for that. So there's different ways to navigate around QuickBooks, and we have right here this dashboard. I want to point out a few key features. This plus sign is probably not one you're going to use a lot, but it is the access to every type of transaction in QuickBooks. So if you're looking for icons, or you're trying to find a way to do something and it's just not kind of showing up, you can always go to this create button and find the type of transaction you're looking for. Example of many ways to get the same place. You could go here to create an invoice, but you could also go to sales and get paid screen, and there would be invoices right there. Both of them are going to the same place. It's just different ways of getting there. If you create invoices every day, you might want to drag that over to the bookmarks bar so that, or actually not drag it, just make it like that. So it's saved in. Now, if I go under bookmarks, I thought it showed up there. Yep, right there, invoices. You notice right there, I kind of use this little icon to pop things in and out. So it's great to see the menu, but then when you are where you need to go, you can push that back in so you have more real estate on your screen to work with. So the plus sign is the menu to do work. Things that I end up finding myself having to go here to get to would be like journal entries, bank deposits sometimes, things that you don't do every day. You can see some of the things that are on here, but it also has the everyday stuff on there. So again, it's just one way to get where you need to go. The other thing to look at is this gear icon at the top here. So this is kind of like your settings, or if you're used to QuickBooks Desktop language, your preferences. So as I mentioned, when you purchase your first version of QuickBooks and you get asked a number of questions, what it's really doing is it's adjusting these settings according to the answers of your questions. And let's just look at a couple of these so you get a sense of what I'm talking about and what's in here. And then again, this is one of those areas where I suggest you just go explore and go look at every tab and see what is in there, because this is the way that you can customize how QuickBooks works for you, and you can get rid of the stuff that you don't use, and you can customize the stuff that you do. So for instance, under the company section, under account and settings, this customizes what you have access to, and it's got your company information. So, if you're creating an invoice and it's not printing an address, guess what? That's because there's no address here. So this is where you could come in and edit. You change your company email, you can come in and edit that. So while you don't need to have this information in here, all of it, to operate QuickBooks, if you're using features like printing an invoice, you probably want your phone and your website and your address on there. The industry really helps them suggest things for you, I guess. So if you open QuickBooks and you choose an industry and you want QuickBooks to set up your chart of accounts, that chart of accounts is going to be created specific to that industry. If you're in the middle of doing a transaction, sometimes you might get a pop-up that says, this is recommended. It'll give you some recommendations on how to proceed with something based on your industry. So just know that that's there again. Let's see here. So this is basically under the settings, under company. Now, if we were to look under sales, this would be where you would customize forms, for instance, or select that you are going to offer discounts or accept tips. Are you going to put finance charges on statements, late fees, tracking inventory, yes or no? So as you turn on and off these things, that's where that unlocks certain features. So again, just kind of looking through that to see how you might customize your experience within QuickBooks. Another section to look at under the advanced, there's things like, do I want to use account numbers? The accounting method is always defaulted to accrual, which I would highly suggest that stay the same unless you're directed by your accountant. Otherwise, the two options are cash or accrual. Within QuickBooks, you can always run reports either way, no matter what your accounting method is. So that's kind of nice. So you can operate it on an accrual basis, but if you need a report printed on a cash basis, you can do that without changing your accounting method. Accrual basis basically recognizes income when it's earned, not necessarily when it's paid. So you put on a deck for a customer, you send them an invoice. That once that invoice is created, you've earned the income, and it becomes income in your accounts or in your financial statements. If you're working on a cash basis, that doesn't show as income until you've actually been paid. So, but the accrual basis is recommended from tax purposes, particularly if you have inventory. Only really simple businesses can operate on a cash basis for tax purposes. The other thing that can put in here, here's your fiscal year, your chart of accounts, other features that you can turn on and turn off. And I won't go through those because those are going to be vary depending on what version of QuickBooks you end up having or are using. But that gives you a sense of the types of things that are in this setting that you can go customize. And again, take your time and work through that. Oops, I went away. I went too far out. Back to here. Under company, there's a section called manage users. So if you have multiple users, you can customize what they have access to or don't have access to. This particular account has just one user. You can view user activity. Probably with this, base level where there's only one user, that user is going to have, there's really no role to assign. They have all the roles. And then you'll see this tab up here for accounting firms. So that's where you can add your free accounting user. And basically you create them in your system and the system sends them an invite to accept and, create their own username to log into the system. So the number of people here, that number of users you have available is dictated by the subscription level that you're subscribing to with QuickBooks. Okay, let's go back to here. And then custom forms and styles is another area of interest. If you want to add your logo or color or reorganize your templates, so this is standard and you can edit it and add those things back in there. And then there's different style templates up here as well for different types of forms. So that's another way to customize the look of QuickBooks. Under the gear icon, we have our lists. So this is where all the lists live. If you're looking for products and services, your chart of accounts, your customer list and your vendor list are within those areas. They're not in the list separately. So if you're looking for a customer list, you have to go to the customer area of the app to get to that. One thing to mention about lists, especially if you're starting new, when you create a list, you want to be thoughtful about how you're going to use the list, what the list is for, and what kind of a naming convention do you want to put in place? A good example is customers or vendors. You should decide and make sure anyone who's using your QuickBooks that might be creating new customers, how you're going to enter new customers. Is it going to be first name, last name, or last name, comma, first name? Different people might approach it different ways. And so pretty soon you have John Doe in your list and you have Doe, comma, John. Same customer, but not to QuickBooks. QuickBooks considers those two different customers. Even if it was John Doe period or John period Doe and John Doe without a period, it would treat that as two separate customers. And you don't want that because then you can't give them accurate invoices or statements. So make sure you think about that and just put some standardization about how you want to name things. And particularly around products and services too, because those lists can get quite long. And sometimes you may want to create categories within the list and then have everything in that category listed under that list. You might see why that is important when we get further down into the process or actually entering a transaction. Last thing here on the tools, just different things that you can do. Here's where you can import or export data. You can see an audit log of everybody who's been in the system when they entered in the system, what transactions they did. The share screen is probably something you will use with a QuickBooks tech service when they want to come in and you want to allow them to see what you're seeing. Reconciling bank account is in here. That's also in another spot. And then this last section is the profile, which you can see what your subscriptions and billing level is and see what's coming, what's new. Video tutorials right here. I'm curious. I don't think it's going to take me anywhere in this software because it's not live or it's a sample. That might take you to QuickBooks YouTube channel, but I'm not 100% sure. There might be some videos just loaded into the software specifically too that are limited in what they cover. Okay, so plus is to do things. Gear icon is to fix things or customize things. Not necessarily to do transactions, to do everything else but enter transactions. We have the help button here. There's a notifications integrations button here. This is your Intuit profile. And then there's a contact experts. QuickBooks does offer live bookkeeping services for free, not for free, for an additional charge. So there are ways to access that service as well. And then I mentioned down below the apps here. And then, of course, right prominent up front is the search window. So that gives you an idea of how to get around in QuickBooks and how you might work to customize that software for yourself. Next, we're going to talk about the chart of accounts, which, amazing, is sitting right here in front of us. As I mentioned, when you're new, QuickBooks will offer to create a chart of accounts for you. You can also upload a chart of accounts that you've already created if you've been using it in another form. Or if you choose to have QuickBooks create the chart of accounts for you, one of the things I would suggest you do early on is just kind of look through that chart of accounts. Make sure you have all the accounts that you need. You might want to rename some. You might want to get rid of some that you know you're never going to use. Depending on the version of QuickBooks that you have limits on how many accounts you can have. I haven't found that limit has been very restrictive, that people are saying, oh, I can't add one more account because I'm going to be up against my limit. It's a pretty generous limit, but there are limits. So when you have accounts that you aren't using, those are counted against you in that limit. So if you're running up against it, that might be the first thing to do, is look and see if you have some accounts you can get rid of. So let's just look through this chart of accounts. The chart of accounts is really the backbone of your accounting system. So every transaction that you enter into QuickBooks is going to affect at least 2 accounts. There's always an equal debit and an equal credit. It could be more than 2 accounts because things can split up between accounts, but there's always going to be 2 accounts created. So what I find some people running into is that they know that there's a number on if they look at a report or an account balance, it's like, that's not right. It should be this. And they go and try to fix this, not realizing that the fix also affects something else. So if you see an account balance or a chart of account that has a wrong balance, you can't just fix that balance. You have to figure out what the problem is and figure out what the other part of the transaction is. Now, it might be as simple as, hey, I didn't spend that much on advertising. I look at my advertising detail and I see that there's 2 transactions that are the same that got entered twice. It might be as simple as just deleting the second duplicate transaction. And then you fix that problem, but it's also affected some other place. So if you paid an expense twice in QuickBooks, even though you only paid it once in the real world, in QuickBooks, that expense got hit twice, and probably the checking account got hit twice too. So you'll see that transaction in the expense account, but it'll also be over somewhere else, either in your checkbook when you paid the expense, or maybe your bills will reflect that you owe money to somebody when you recorded that expense. So just be aware of that. Let's see here. Just kind of looking at the chart of accounts, just to understand how it's organized when you start looking for things. Obviously, if your account list is long, you can just search and say, I'm looking for my telephone account. So I'm going to put in telephone here. Whoops, might help if I spelled it right. And it'll pop up. Otherwise, just be aware that this entire list is in an organized way. You may not see it at the top, at front. It might not make sense. It's not organized alphabetically, although you can do that just by clicking that arrow up and down. But it is organized by account type primarily with, so here's a good hint right here on this question mark. The first accounts are on your balance sheet, your assets, your liabilities, and your equity account. What you own, what you owe, and what your equity in the business is based on that. Assets minus liabilities equal equity. And the balance sheet is a cumulative statement. So it doesn't just show your accounts receivable for a given month or period. It shows the accounts receivable over the life of the loan that are still active. So you might have an accounts receivable, God forbid, that a customer hasn't paid you for over a year. If you do a balance sheet just for this year, it's still going to show in there, even though it was dated in a previous year. So cumulative statements there. Profit and loss statements show income and expenses and the resulting profit or loss, therefore the name of the business. And those are specific to a particular time frame. So if you run a report for this year, January through December, it is only going to show income and expenses for this year. So the balance sheet is the cumulative statement that kind of shows the life of the business from day one. The P&L shows the activity for a given period. Okay, so back to chart of accounts, organized by balance sheet accounts first. So here's our asset accounts like checking, receivables, inventory, equipment. Then we get into your liability accounts like accounts payable, credit cards payable, taxes payable, loans payable. And then we get into our equity accounts. And typically you don't enter transactions to equity. Those happen behind the scenes. This retained earnings is especially is just something that happens behind the scenes at the end of the year when the income accounts and the expense accounts are kind of tied into retained earnings. That profit is booked for history at that point through retained earnings. And then we get into the profit and loss accounts, the income accounts, the cost of goods if you're selling product, the expense accounts, and there's also other income and other expense accounts available. So this is where I would suggest looking at these accounts and editing them if need be, or adding to them if there's a specific account that you know you want to use, then you could do that. And part of that is deciding how you want to track things. You know, some accounts when they're set up will just have one income account that says sales. Nothing wrong with that. That'll get you what you need to file your tax return. And it'll, show your total income for the business. But maybe you want to break out your income into different categories. Looking at this business in particular, it's like a landscaping construction type of company. So they've got some design income if they're designing a project. They've got landscaping services. And underneath landscaping services, they've broken that out by job materials and labor. And even within those sections, they've broken it out even further. Now, that's probably overkill for most businesses that we would work with, but there is a way to create sub-accounts. So these that are indented are noted as sub-accounts. So these four are a sub-account of this one, and job materials is a sub-account of landscaping services. What it allows you to do is see the detail, but then if you want to have a more cleaner look on your financial statement, you could just show landscaping services, and that will include all the income in these sections that are a sub underneath of it. So it just really depends on what you want to be able to see. And keep in mind that there's ways to see things without breaking them out. And I'll use my favorite example I like to use about that. So somewhere under here, we've had it before, telephone. As you see within the expense categories and within the income categories, they're typically organized alphabetical. So I'm going to have to go to the next page to get to telephone, which is a sub-account under utilities. This might be a good example. Do you really need gas and electric and telephone broken out? Could you just not have a utilities account? Your gas and electric vendor is a different vendor than your telephone vendor. So if you really wanted to know what you were spending on each, you could look at that vendor. And for most businesses, these these expenses are not ones you can really control, not like advertising or payroll. I mean, your telephone is what the telephone is for the most part, unless you're in certain industries. But same with gas and electric. They're not really ones you can manage well. They are what they are. So do you really need to see the detail on a financial statement? But everybody has to make that decision for themselves. So again, another way you can customize QuickBooks when you're setting this stuff up, you want to think about what information do I need to better manage my business? And can I set up my chart of accounts so that information is broken out? I was just talking to a client the other day who has a storefront and also does online sales. And the online sales, they were just getting started with their QuickBooks, and we were walking through some questions, and it's like, well, I don't know where I should categorize this. Should I just put it under Shopify? It's like, well, really not really. I mean, that's the source where the money's coming through, but what you really want to know on your financials is, what did you sell? Or at the very least, if you don't care what you sell because your online store is, maybe you've got that detail in Shopify, you can see what you sold, or it's not a huge part of your income, maybe just show it as online sales. But you probably want to at least have that separated out from your storefront sales, for instance. Or you could say, if you wanted to know what you sold online, you might have like a storefront sales with departments under that, and an online sales with similar departments under that, if you wanted. Or you could say department A in store online as your sub account. So there's lots of ways to slice and dice the data. And that's also something you kind of learn as you use QuickBooks. I always recommend starting out simple. Start out with just having utilities and not any of the detail. And if you find that you really think that detail is going to be valuable for you, you can always add sub-accounts down the road or additional accounts down the road. Keeping it simple to start is a great way to go. But just know that is out there. So in order to edit an account, This drop-down arrow over here will allow you to edit it. And we're just going to look at what's in this account. So if you wanted to change this to, maybe you don't have gas and maybe it's all electric. Maybe you'd put in here light and power or whatever you want. You want to change the name. All you have to do is just edit that and change the name. I'm just going to change this. Is it not going to let me do it? Oh yeah, there we go. You always have to have an account name and an account type. So if this is expenses, and your other options would be income, other income, assets, liabilities. Obviously, your gas and electric is an expense. And then the detail type, it's required, but to me, I still haven't quite found out what the use of this is. I'm obviously not using this at a high enough level to understand the significance of this, but pick one that fits the best. And then you can see that this box that says make this a sub-account is checked. I'm going to uncheck that just for demonstration purposes. And the description is optional, whatever you want to put in there. Sometimes when you have a specific category that you only want specific things in, it's good to put a description in there. Gas and electric's pretty straightforward. Use for billable expenses. This is not connected. This would only be as if you were buying an expense that you wanted to ultimately bill to a customer. So if you had the job materials, if we were in that account, this might be checked. So we want to be able to bill those materials for that job to a specific customer when we designate it as such. So when I save this, it's going to change the name over here, and it's also going to move it up the list because it's no longer going to be a sub account. So it's going to be a main account of itself. And so it's going to be up higher in the alphabet than you. So let's save it. And now you'll see that gas and electric is gone. And oh yeah, we got to go back a page. And our assets, liabilities, income, expenses. There's gas and electric as a main account. So that's how easy it is to edit a transaction or edit a chart of accounts. If you want to create a new chart of accounts, I don't think I've got it. There's new account. You can import accounts or just create a new account and it's going to look similar. So now you have to add in your name, your account type, detail type, whether you want to make it a sub account. If you choose sub account, it's going to ask you what account you want to make it a sub account of. And then there's the descriptions. So that's how you create a new account. Similarly to, let's go back. To delete an account, you really don't delete accounts in the online world. You just make them inactive. So two things will happen when you make an account inactive. It will reduce the number of accounts you're using that's counted in your subscription, but it'll also hide that account from any drop-down list. So if I make this account inactive, disposal fees, and I'm going in to create a transaction to write a check for some expenses, and I click on the drop-down list to choose which expense account, disposal fees is not going to show there. So it's still in the system. It can be reactivated if you want it to be, but if it's inactive, it won't show up on this list and it won't show up in any drop-down list to choose from. What it doesn't do when you make an account inactive is it doesn't eliminate any transactions that occurred within that account. Those stay in place. So you're not losing transaction data from previous years, but you might just find that, hey, we don't pay rent anymore. We bought a building. Yay. Let's get rid of this rent account. Well, you've paid rent for the last 5 years. Those transactions are still going to exist. And if you print a report for those periods, those transactions are still going to show up. It's just that that account going forward isn't available to be selected for future uses unless you make it active again. We talked about a chart of accounts, or not a chart of accounts. We talked about account numbers. That is not activated. If it was, there'd be a field here that would allow you to put in an account number. So if you're saying, gee, I want to use account numbers, but it doesn't look like my QuickBooks allows me to do that, or if you find yourself saying something like, I think this feature should be available, go back to that gear icon, and it might be just that it hasn't been turned on. So in this case, account numbers is not turned on. We could go do that and have that available. Okay, all right. Our favorite topic to talk about is the bank feeds. So let's go back home. And this is one area that's kind of changed a little bit. So I apologize in advance if I fumble through this a little bit. So here are the bank accounts that are connected to this QuickBooks subscription. And if I click this, I'm not sure where it's going to take me. Yes, this is what I would call the bank feed window, which I think you can get to also. Get out of here. That's the fun part about QuickBooks. It's always popping up all these suggestions and cluttering up your space. If you go to the feed window, does it get us to the same spot? No, it's kind of weird. They call it bank feed, but feed is really just this business feed about all the things that you could be doing. Here's an accounting agent that's saying, providing you some insights on your profit and loss, that this particular miscellaneous expense increased by 966%. Those are kind of interesting things to do, but that's not what we were looking for. We were looking for, we're going to go back to the home and back to our bank feed. So as I mentioned, and then, this is one of those things that if this was my QuickBooks account, I would want this card right here at the top. And so I could customize it to do that. So the bank feed is one of the interesting features that's really front and center in the QuickBooks Online platform. As I mentioned, when you start a new QuickBooks Online, it kind of forces you, or you feel like you're being forced to connect your bank account. And that's where these bank feeds come into play. And so there's 3 accounts that are connected to this subscription. And these little numbers up in the corner are transactions that have come from the bank and are sitting on this window right here, pending 25. That's because we're in this account, to be dealt with. So these are transactions that have cleared your bank, but are not currently in your QuickBooks numbers. Yes, they're in your QuickBooks through this feed, but if you were to run a report, profit and loss statement, for instance, none of the expenses or income that are listed here would show up there. So they're sitting here pended for you to either post them or exclude them. I would highly recommend not excluding anything unless directed otherwise, I would say. The ideal is that you have a bank account for your business. It includes only business transactions. You really wouldn't want to exclude anything. And even if by chance you happen to pay a personal expense out of your business account for some reason, you don't really want to exclude that either, because you want it to show up when you reconcile your bank account. So what I suggest, instead of excluding it, is you create like an equity account that says personal expenses. It's basically like you're taking a draw from your business. So you have a place to put those things that are not going to show up as an expense on the profit and loss statement. The equity side shows up on the balance sheet. So they're not going to affect the profitability, but they are going to affect your bank account, because it did. It was money that came out of the bank account, and it'll be there when you reconcile. So everything that's on these cards needs to be processed through this window before it shows up in your QuickBooks financial records. So the nice thing about using the bank feed is it, fills in some of the information. Personally, I think it could do a better job of filling in this information. Maybe this is somewhere AI can help. I don't know. But I very seldom find myself just accepting whatever they give us in this window and just, post, just click on it. They try to match an expense category that they think is the right match. It may or may not be. Once you're in your QuickBooks and you start using it regularly, and every time you pay a bill to a rental, it goes to equipment rental, then it's going to get smarter about putting everything in there. But even then, you have to double check and make sure that it's right, because maybe one time you bought something from them, you bought a piece of equipment from them instead of rented something from them. So you just need to watch what they're suggesting. I always recommend clicking on the item so you can get down to this detail, and you can see then what they're putting in there, or what they're pulling over in there from the bank. And I don't want this. See, I'm going to get rid of this. I want to get rid of this box, but I'm afraid when I do that, let's try that again. So it has the boxes here that I can select, whether it's an expense, if there's a vendor involved. I'm not sure how I can. What account it should be charged to. If I'm buying products and services from a vendor, I might need to select the product and service as the inventory item. If I want to have this billable to a customer, I need to put the customer's name in there. And then the memo. And I'm a big fan of memos, because when you go back and look at your financial reports, the memos are included in there, and it's a good reminder of what the money was spent for. And you think you're going to remember, and pretty soon, 6 months later, you look at your advertising account and you say, geez, what did I spend all this money for? And then you dig into all the details, and there's no memos on there. It would be nice to say, oh, that was a banner, or that was a digital ad, or whatever it might be, so you can easily be remembered without having to do a lot of digging to find out how that money was used or where money came from a sales side of the transaction. So basically what you need to do is you need to go in and respond to each of these transactions by picking the right category and any of those other items within there, adding a memo if you're selecting a customer. And then once that's done, you can post it. So think if we were at the end of here, here's my post. Now, if I have, this is an account transaction. I should have changed my screen resolution so I could get a little bit more on my screen here. Perhaps this $800 goes to more than one account. That is what this split button down here is for. So I can split it into more than one account. So this gives me a little bit better view of what I can, and then I can put a description for each line item and an amount for each line item. And if I'm buying products and services that are inventory items, I can put those on there too. And then I can post from this window as well. QuickBooks also has rules, which are, I think, really great if they're used right. Again, I would probably not jump into creating a bunch of rules, but you'll notice as things come through, for instance, if this vendor was the vendor that I paid my rent to every month, and that's the only thing I ever changed, I could create a rule to always, when this vendor is the vendor, always charge it to rent and automatically save it. So it could automatically process that and it would go, you wouldn't have to deal with it on this window. It would automatically do it for you. So there are ways to use that. There's also ways where you can say, this isn't probably a good example, but when you use your debit card, a lot of times it'll come through on your bank as a POS, point of sale, date, numbers, transaction numbers, all kind of stuff, and then a business name somewhere buried within that. You could use this rule to say, if the description includes a rental anywhere in it, just change the name to a rental instead of the POS, blah, 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 blah. So there's ways to use it that way too, to change the name of how it shows up automatically for you. So we have options of posting. We have some options in here called match. So whenever a transaction comes in from the bank, the first thing that QuickBooks is going to do is say, okay, this information came from the bank. Then we have this information over here already in QuickBooks that you've already entered. Is there anything that's the same? And that's where the matches come into play. Here's a deposit that came from the bank, and here's a deposit in QuickBooks for the same date for the same amount. QuickBooks is suggesting that's a match. And if it indeed is, and it more than likely is, then all you have to do is match, and it takes care of it because you've already put all the detail into QuickBooks, and now you're just matching it up with what's coming through the bank. These other things are things that are not in QuickBooks, or QuickBooks doesn't think it's in QuickBooks, that you need to deal with. So if it's a match and you're certain, 100% certain, yep, that's the same one, you can just match it and it'll go in there. If it is a match, that probably means you have the sufficient detail in QuickBooks because you created that transaction from the start. Whereas in the post side, there is no detail over in QuickBooks, so you have to add that detail. You might want to click on the transaction where there's a match just to make sure that this information has all the right information in it. You don't have to add any more detail, but pretty much if it's a match and it's a match, you can just do match, 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 and then those are taken care of. And then you just have to deal with the ones that are posted. So once those transactions are accepted, so now we went from 25 down to 23. Now those are going to show up on the financial side of the QuickBooks. Before they were just kind of sitting over here in limbo. The other thing I would note on this is I was just working with a customer the other day and they had multiple accounts and they had in this section here, instead of match, it said pair. And what that was picking up on was that, maybe they moved money from their savings account to their checking account. So, coming from the bank feed, that would be both in the checking account bank feed and the savings account bank feed. And QuickBooks recognized that, hey, this is the same transaction in these two accounts. So when you paired it, it accepted the transaction on both sides. So keep in mind that is an option also. I think I'm going to talk some more about deposits and deposit details and payments when we get into doing those transactions. So I think I'm going to hold on that for right now. If you aren't using the bank feed, then you'll just enter all your transactions manually, which is what we're going to do after the break. So just be aware that you don't have to set up the bank feeds if you don't want to. One other, well, we'll talk about that after the break. So right now we're going to take like a 5-minute break. Let's try to be back here by 10:10 or so. And we'll get started with the actual entering transactions. Is there any questions in the chat that we maybe need to deal with?
There was one that just, can you please show us how to post a bank transaction? But we should be good there. Otherwise, oh,
We're getting started with our business. We're considering trying out Wave because it's free. Okay. I didn't know anything about Wave, but I just had somebody come in the other day and they were using it. And it's limited. It really is limited. I guess it would depend on what your business is. It we got it. We found out a way to make it work. It wasn't as intuitive, me having the QuickBooks brain, and you also, if you've used it, it didn't act like QuickBooks necessarily. But it if it's free and you want to try it, and just like any other software, the free version is limited. So maybe the new an upgraded version is a better version, or has more features. I know QuickBooks has gotten a little pricey for what it used to be, so people are looking for other options. And Wave is one I've heard of, and one I just had some personal experience with. Not sure the experience would have lead me to recommend it necessarily, but it was very limited interaction and it was on the free version. So it's probably just something maybe you want to try out and play around with it a little bit and see how you like it. All right, we got a couple other new ones here. The cost for QuickBooks really varies based on what version you get. If you go to that QuickBooks website that I posted in the chat, that will take you right to the pricing page. And actually, I could probably get there pretty easily. Yep, there's their 50% off for 3 months. Plans and pricing is what I think their lowest version is about $30 a month regularly. Yeah, 38. I would say most people are in this plus category for what they need for basic services. So the discounts can help, and the discount also from the SBDC side, which does not apply to Simple Start. It only applies to Plus and Advanced. So if you're looking at the smaller level version, now this is interesting. I don't think I have seen a free version of QuickBooks. Wow. Track income, maybe you want to try that instead of Wave, and then you can easily transfer. The nice thing about the way the versions are set up, you can unlock the features of the higher versions, just change your subscription and all your data stays there and it's in good place. Okay. One bank account, run profit and loss. Oh, send 2 invoices a month. Track income and expenses. Interesting. No accountant access either. All right. I think that got through all of our questions. All right.
Ellie, we have one question in the chat if you would like to answer that before you get started again.
Sure.
How do you deal with expenses incurred before income so they're not out of the bank account as there was no money there to buy anything yet?
I'm assuming you use personal funds then to pay for those expenses, or they're on a credit card or something. Um, I mean, if it's personal funds that you used, I think I would still put it in QuickBooks and then tag it as an equity. You know, maybe it's advertising expense and then it's an equity as in instead of a owner draw, it's an owner contribution. You're putting personal funds in the business to pay for the expenses. If you have incurred an expense but haven't paid for it yet, like you have a vendor who invoiced you and they're giving you 30 days to pay, so then you would want to enter it as a bill. And we'll talk about how to do that in a few minutes. Okay, I think we're up to speed. So with that, we're going to dive back in. Okay, are we still seeing our QuickBooks screen there?
Yes, we are.
All right. One tip I would uh, offer also, and I found this to be helpful, especially when you're kind of going back and forth to different places and you don't really want to lose where you are here, but you want to go look at something somewhere else. You can just duplicate your window, right click on your tab up there and hit duplicate. And now we have two windows with the same information, that one and this original one. But now if I move away to somewhere else, let's see. Let's start with sales. So let's see if we go over here to invoices. But I click over here, this is still on bank transactions. So I can kind of toggle back and forth. Sometimes you have to be careful. You might need to refresh a screen because changes you made on one screen may not always show up on the other one right away. So you may have to refresh right here through your menu bar to get that data to show. But that makes it a little bit easier to get around in QuickBooks because you can't really have multiple windows open like you used to in the desktop version. So under the sales section, we have overview, and then we have all these different sections. And if we click on overview, all these sections also show across the top. Not quite in the same way as they used to. Okay, let's. Some of that things, again, this is a change in how this window looks. It used to have all these same tabs right across the top, and it doesn't quite have them all. But so this would give you an overview of where things stand, invoices you need to create, invoices that need to be paid, income over time. But what we really want to work on is how do you enter sales into QuickBooks? So again, you're gonna find that there is multiple ways to enter sales. You can even do it from the customer window, or you can do it from this window. So there's two ways to enter income into QuickBooks. You can either enter it through current sales or through sales transactions or sales receipts or through invoices. And the only difference between those two types of transactions is when you recognize the income. A sales transaction would be like somebody came to my store, they bought something, they paid me. I want to record the sale of the product, but I also want to record the receipt of the cash that I received. That would be a sales transaction. A invoice would be someone came to my store or I provided them a service and I'm going to invoice them. They did not pay me at the time they received the product or the service. That would be creating an invoice. And when you create an invoice, you recognize the sale, but you don't have any cash to recognize. What you have to recognize is the accounts receivable, the fact that that customer owes you money. Before we go into this, I want to just step over here to the customer hub and look at the customer list. because sales start with customers. So I want to just show you how to get to that customer list. Whenever you create an invoice, you have the opportunity to create a new customer, and you can create it simply by creating the very bare minimum information like their name, but you can also create add into their customer record all the other details you'd want to capture, like their address and their phone number and their email address and things of that nature. So this shows all of our customers alphabetically. And, from here, you could actually create an invoice right for that customer from the customer window. You wouldn't have to go to the invoices section where we just were. If QuickBooks knows that, hey, this is kind of indicating the next logical step for any particular customer. These customers have created invoices because they're just customers in our list, and the next logical step would be to sell them something. These customers we've already sold them something, so the next logical step is for them to pay us, and so received payment is showing up as theirs. But as you click the drop down, you have access to all types of things. You can create a sales receipt or a sales transaction here, as well as an invoice. I want to look at one record so you have an idea of the kind of detail that is available in a customer record. Company name, business name, there's custom fields. If we go to this edit button, no, I want to, what do I want to do? I actually want to go up here and edit the customer. Now you can see more name and contact, and no mobile, website, all that, how you're communicating with them, especially if you're email marketing or mailing them emails. Address information. Is it the same as their billing address? If there's any notes or attachments, you can attach files. Like if you accept a credit app from somebody, you could attach that to their record, to their customer record. What's their primary payment method? And the delivery form or the sales form delivery options. Are you mailing them an invoice or emailing them an invoice? Credit limits. You can type your customers. Like this company is a construction landscaping company, so they have two customer types, residential and commercial. It's another way for them to slice and dice their data to say how much money or how many our sales are coming from these types of customers. Are they exempt from sales tax? If not, what sales tax code applies? Opening balance would be only if you're starting this customer in a new company and they had an outstanding balance, you would plug that in there. So that gives you an idea. And then there's the custom fields that you can add different things regarding that customer. Maybe you want to put their birth date or their spouse's name or, their child's name if you're an orthodontist or something. I don't know. It's custom for a reason. It's different for every customer. So that gives you an idea of what's in a customer record. And in this customer hub, when you look at that customer record, you can also see their transactions. So their transaction history, their statements, recurring transactions, other details. There's a whole line over here. Tasks or notes that you've put in there, conversations, a couple new things there. So you can see a lot of information regarding the customer and their interactions with you at their customer record. All right, now we're going to go back to so I might pass it. So I'm going to go to the invoices page, and I'm going to create an invoice. I should have just stayed at the customer page. I could have done it there too, but create an invoice right there. So here's what a typical invoice would look like. And again, this is one of those invoices you can edit and customize, as we talked about right there. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a customer name. And as soon as I add the customer name, any relevant information in that customer record is going to pre-fill in here. So it's going to add in their address if they have one. It's going to add in their payment terms, their email, all of those things. The date of the invoice, do I see that right here? Is going to be today's date. You can change that if you need to. And then because this customer has net 30 terms, it knows what the due date is going to be. Then down below, we're going to indicate what we're selling to the customer from our product and service list. So we can just start typing. And with this search feature the way it is, how you organize your product list might be less important because you can find it through the search, but it's nice to be able to know where to look for things within the list. So when you see a colon like that, that indicates sub-account. So gardening is a sub-account of landscaping. Just so, and you'll see that on chart of accounts when they get put in an account field, you'll see that colon. That's what that means. We're really putting it in the gardening account, but the gardening account is a sub-account of landscaping, so it's going to be rolled up into that number as well. So we're going to bill him for 4 weeks of weekly gardening. And there was no rate in this item field. So as soon as I pick the item, it's going to pre-fill in a rate and the tax status, if there is any. It didn't have a rate because it probably thought, well, my suggestion on putting rates in items is if you typically sell an item for a standard price, and that's the price that you charge most people, use that rate. If it's like all over the board, leave it 0. But if I charge the same rate to 75% of the people, I only have to change it 25% of the time if I put that rate in. If I put no rate in, I've got to change it every time. So think about just data entry time savings. So we're going to say it's $50 a week, and then it's going to do the math of 200. And because this sample company is based in California, they do not charge sales tax for services. So that's why it's not taxed. And then the other thing we're going to sell them is a rock fountain, which is an item. This is the description of the item. This is the quantity. Well, the quantity we put in there. This is the rate that came right from the item record. It did the math. It's taxable. And so now that's what we're selling. So when we save this invoice, well, one thing I'll point out this on the sales tax a little bit. So this rate was determined based on the customer. In the customer's record, you indicate what rate applies to them. If you don't indicate a rate for the customer, it may either stay blank or it will be whatever the default rate is for your company. So just a reminder that sales tax in South Dakota is charged based on the location of where the customer received the services. So in this case, I'm providing the services at the customer's location, so that rate should be indicative of where that customer lives, not where my business is located. So just keep that in mind. So it knows what the rate is, and it also knows what's taxable. So it should be showing a tax on $275,000 or $275, but not on the 200. For some reason, it's not showing up. I ran into this with a previous class. I think it might show up in the end, but it's not showing up just yet. I wonder if I have to save it. Yeah, now the tax is calculated. So when I save this invoice, what's going to happen? My sales account, my income in my business is going to go up by $475. And that income is going to be tied to whatever account these two items are tied to. So this is the name of the product or the service, not the name of the income account that's going to be affected. The income account that's going to be affected is within this product and service item record. So I can't see that from the screen, and I can't get to it from the screen. But my guess is these are in 2 different sales categories. One's probably a materials sales and one's a services sales related. So service sales is going up by 200, material sales is going up by 275. My sales tax payable, QuickBooks keeps that separate. It's not considered an income. You don't get to keep that money. You're just collecting it on behalf of the taxing agency. So that goes into a liability account of sales tax payable. And the total of $400 or $513 goes into accounts receivable. We're creating an invoice. We know the customer's not paying for this right now. We're going to send this to them so they'll pay us. So we're going to record an accounts receivable of $513. Sales up by $475. Sales tax payable by $38. Those are our credits, and our debit to match that is accounts receivable. So we're going to save and close. Now, if we go to our invoice list. Let's see. This should show up here. Refresh. I'm hoping this didn't just, I think we'll be fine. Okay, so we've searched our list for today. There is that. Here's received payment. If I go over to my customer hub, which more likely might be where I where I go when I get invoice payments, I might go to my customer hub instead of my invoice page, but either way works. If we find Dylan on this list, now it's going to say receive payment, just like it did on the invoice list. So the difference might be is if I have multiple invoices for one customer, I don't want to just pay the one invoice. I want to pay for all the invoices. So I'm going to go to here for Dylan. Probably would make no difference at this point. So now I'm going to say, okay, the check came in the mail for $513. We want to record that that was paid. So we're recording a payment. Probably didn't come in on the same day as the invoice. So we're at least going to say that came up on that day. The reference number could be the check number of the check that was received. The payment method check, or if it's a charge, a credit card or ACH, there's other ways to do that. The key here is to show where the money went to. We always put the money into undeposited funds because how many times do you get a check in the mail from a customer and run that check right over to the bank? Not very often, unless it's a really big check. So typically you're grouping those checks together before you make a bank deposit. So this undeposited fund, think about that as like the bank bag that's sitting on the desk that needs to go to the bank. So here's undeposited funds. And we're recording the payment of this invoice. And it already knew that invoice was there. And it already knew we were paying that invoice because the amount that were received of $513 exactly matched this invoice. If the customer has multiple invoices, it's still going to match. It's going to first look for an exact amount and it'll match it with that. Or it will say, it doesn't match with any of my invoices. I'm going to apply it to the oldest invoice first. And you can change how they're applied if there's multiple ones there, but that's the mindset QuickBooks is going to use. First, it's going to look for exact match. Other than that, it's going to look for oldest invoice first. So when we save this payment and record this payment, what's going to happen? Well, what we're telling it is that this customer paid us, so accounts receivable will go down to show that this customer has now paid us, no longer owes us money, and we're showing that we're going to put it into undeposited funds. So we're going to record and close, and that's what's going to happen. No income is going to be affected at this point because it was already affected when the invoice was created. And now we come back to our list, and there's the received payments gone because we took care of that for him. Now, to make the deposit, you have a couple options. My preferred option is to go to create and go to bank deposit. And here we have several receipts. This is basically what's sitting in accounts in this undeposited funds are these things here. These are all payments that have been recorded that now need to be deposited. So this is the one we just did, but we could also say, hey, we're going to take all of these to the bank. So now we're going to have a bank deposit of $2,575.52. And what happens when I create this transaction is undeposited funds is going to go down by that amount, and my checking account is going to go up by that amount. And the reason I like to do it this way is because now when I do the bank feed, there's going to be a bank deposit coming in for that $2,500. And I've already created it in QuickBooks so that when it comes to my bank feed, it's just automatically going to match. Otherwise, I would have to go figure out which of these deposits, or if I didn't deposit it and they were still sitting in an undeposited fund, I would have to figure out which payments made up that $2,500. And that could be difficult if you had a lot of checks. So you want to, now the one thing I've learned in working with some clients recently and the way this has changed is, it didn't used to be this way. If we go back to our bank transactions and we look at a deposit, and I want to categorize. Let me close out of that. Yeah, because this was a deposit that wasn't tied to anything. So I want to, let me see. Look at that. And I want to, I can go down here and do a split. And it's basically going to, oh, this is a, sorry. So had I had anything left in the undeposited funds, I should have not done what I just did and cleaned them off. They would show up here and I could select them just like I did when we did the deposit. So there's a way to do it when it comes to the bank feed. The problem is, just from a logistical standpoint, if you think about it, when you receive those payments, you've got all the information in front of me, you know who paid you, you know what you're taking to the bank, all that data is right there. So you might as well just go create the deposit and be done with it. Now, if I'm going through the bank feed and I haven't done that, and I've got all these transactions that show up here, when am I doing this when it comes to the bank feed? Not probably the day. I might not be doing this till the end of the month, maybe, or longer. And by then, that stuff is long gone and put away, and maybe I didn't keep a copy of my deposit receipt, so now I don't really know what was in that $2,500, and I've got 50 transactions here I'm trying to sort through. I say just save yourself the hassle, do the deposit right within QuickBooks, so then when it comes to the bank feed, all you have to do is match it. That's kind of my mindset, and as I talked through with my customer about that was like, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Do it when it's ready at hand. So there's some things, that the bank feed makes easier, but sometimes it's still easier just to do certain parts of the transaction right within QuickBooks. Okay, so that is how we record income. Now we're going to talk about how we record payment. And so we're going to go back this out and do expenses. So we've got under expenses, we have expense transactions. So that would be like writing a check or using a debit card to pay an expense. And then we have bills, which would be when you get an invoice from your supplier and they give you time to pay it. You've got the product, but you don't have don't have to pay for it right away. First, let's look at our vendor list. You'll see that it's very similar to the customer list. And it also does have, the detail of transactions with that vendor, their current outstanding balances, their vendor details. If we edit, we can see the type of information that we can keep: name, contact, address, notes and attachments. If you pay them via ACH, you can put that information in there. Are they a 1099 vendor? You can track that and get their tax ID number. If you have payment terms with them, if there's this accounting is, if you buy a product from a vendor and you automatically want to have that expense category defaulted to that bill, you could choose that account here. So that's the type of information that's in a vendor record. And if we go back then to our expense transactions side, we can enter an expense. So these are examples of expenses. I'm not going to talk about credit card expenses too much, but when you create, and I'm going to just do new transaction expense. You have an option when you create an expense. Are you paying it out of your checking account? And if you paid with a check, you could put check, or if you paid, it doesn't have debit card in there, but you could add that. And if you paid with a credit card, but if you paid with a credit card, it's not necessarily the payment method. That's more of a note for the file. It's this account that's going to affect the checking account. Or if you have a credit card, you paid it with your MasterCard, you would choose that. And then the date it was paid, and then what you paid, obviously the amount, and for what did you purchase. Categories is expenses, items, or products and services. So if you're tracking inventory on a certain product, you would have to put that product, how many of them you purchased, at what rate for a total that you're paying the supplier for. Or if you're paying for an expense like utilities, it would be just in this category section, not in the item section. So let us enter. So basically when this happens, whatever is in these fields down here, those will be the expense categories, or in the case of buying product to resell, inventory categories that will be affected. And then depending on what you choose here, you're either going to decrease your checking account, you're going to increase the balance on your MasterCard, or you're going, those are really your two options, because we don't really have a cash account, because we're recording the expense down here and the payment of the expense up here. So this is when you actually pay for it right away. You can also make expenses recurring. If you have something that comes out of your checking account automatically, you can just make it recurring, and you can say this recurs every month on the 15th of the month, and it'll just automatically enter it in, so you don't have to enter it in every time. Or it will match it when it comes through the bank feed for you. What I really want to focus more on, because it's a little more, that's pretty straightforward, is the bill pay side of things. So if we go back down to our expenses and we go to bills, this would be where you would be buying product for resale in your store for the most part, or just any vendor who's willing to give you time to pay. And so we're going to do a transaction so we can add a bill. That's when we're adding something new. And here's our vendors down here. So just like our customers, these are vendors that we owe money to. So they're being tagged as, let's see what I want. Receive payments basically, or that you're going to make a payment. But here we're going to add a bill. So we're going to create a bill. And we're going to choose a vendor, Cal Telephone. And we're going to say we have net 30-day terms. So we get that, or net 60. Okay, well, doesn't matter. Whatever I choose is going to pick the right due date. If there's a bill number, we could put that in there. So this is recognizing that the last time we paid this company, we paid them for telephone for $56.50. But this time we're actually buying a phone system from them. And that's why they're giving us time to pay. They're probably not going to give us 60 days to pay our phone bill. So in this case, we're going to go up to our asset list, maybe, or down to our asset list. And of course, we don't have just a general fixed asset account. So we're just going to create one. Let's see. Oh, I know what's it. So now I'm creating a new account. So it's taking me over to this window. I've got to choose some categories here. So now I can see where it's going to show up in my balance sheet. So I'm going to save that. Now I'm going back to the transaction, new phone system. And I'm going to say it was $5,000. It's not billable. That includes tax. We don't worry about taxable when it's something we're buying, I guess. I could put a memo in there, but really this is the memo I am tracking there. So now I'm going to save and close. And when I save and close this, what's going to happen? My asset account is going to go up by $5,000 because I purchased that. That'll be on my balance sheet. And because I'm creating a bill, I'm not paying for this right now. My accounts payable are going to go up by $5,000. So now if I go back to my vendor list, and I see Cal Telephone, I think if I would have scrolled over on my screen, it would have said pay bill, but I didn't. Let's see. This is where having a big screen is helpful with these. Yeah. Or customizing this list so I don't have 1099 tracking. I really wouldn't need that on this list. But here's my Cal Telephone, $5,000. Let's pay the balance. Okay. Here's another caveat. QuickBooks likes you to use their bill pay, all that stuff. So when they have like schedule a payment or pay the balance and they take you to this, you just want to get out of it. That's not really what you want to do. What you want to do is click on this drop-down list and say, make payment. Or if we were over here in our bills window, we had this little icon at the top that says pay bills. So we would want to do that. So this again. Which tells us the same thing, gets us the same spot. So we're going to, oh, I don't want to do that. New transaction, bill. You don't want to use like an expense or a check. This is funny that it's showing it this way. I wonder if it. You want to use the bill pay function, otherwise it won't know. So I guess we want to mark it as paid as long once we have this in here. So you want to get to the bill and you want to be able to pay that bill. This is, I apologize. This is making it confusing. I don't want to schedule on payment. I really don't want to mark it as paid because I don't think we've actually done the transaction to pay it yet, which I'm trying to find. And it's, okay, let's go to bill payments. See if that, no, that's again, their automated bill function. I want to go to pay bills. Not scheduled payment. What am I missing? There we go. Click pay bills. That's all you need to do. Okay, so we're in the pay bills window. And why this is important that you do this versus writing a check, even though you may physically write a check, QuickBooks knows this is in here as a bill, and so you need to pay the bill so QuickBooks knows it gets paid. Otherwise, you might write a check and you might tag it as an expense. So then now you've got the expense tagged twice, and then you're going to pay the bill out of your checking account. That's going to be right, but you're still going to show that this bill is owing. So you always need to go and pay the bill, not write a check. So we're going to put in $5,000 here. And we're going to save and close, not schedule payment, because that will take you to the online bill pay. But we do want to make sure that we have an account selected up here. So it's coming out of our checking account. And it's $5,000. If we had multiple bills here, like we do, we could pay them all at once and it would generate different checks. If we had multiple bills for the same company, we could check them both and it would make one check for the total of both. You could also say, hey, I've got 60 days to pay this. I'm only going to pay 2,500 of it right now. I'm not going to pay the full amount. So we bought it on the 8th of May. So maybe at the end of May, we'll pay half of it and the rest at the end of June. So you can also choose not to pay the full amount of the bill. Okay. Save and close. So now our accounts payable went down by 2,500 and our checking account balance went down by 2,500. Sorry, that took me a little longer to get around there than I anticipated. I'm going to visit the bank feed again and just visit the reconciliation window so that you know what that looks like. So I think if I go to bank register, this is just like your typical checkbook register where you'd see ins and outs. There's the reconcile button. Also under this gear or the plus icon, I believe, also has reconcile somewhere. Sure, make a liar out of me here. Okay, it doesn't. Maybe it's under settings. I thought I saw it on one of these windows. Yep, right there, tools. So reconciling your bank is highly, 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 highly encouraged. And do it on a regular basis because it'll make your life easier. And why, you say, hey, the bank's, all the money's coming in and out, it's all coming into here. Why do I need to reconcile? Well, two reasons. If you're not using the bank feed, obviously, things can get entered wrong or not entered at all because you have that automatic payment that comes out of the bank that you forgot about because you aren't using the bank feed. Even using the bank feed, sometimes what happens is you might have written a check that didn't clear the bank. And the only reason you're going to know that is if you're keeping your books up to date. Sometimes things get transposed, numbers get transposed either as you're entering it or as the bank enters it. So you want to make sure you catch those things. So to reconcile, it's super easy. Assuming you've got kind of all the stuff in, all the books in for the month. So let's go to, can I just, okay, I just want to get started. There we go. Okay, so you get to the reconciliation window. You're going to reconcile your checking account. So you're going to choose that. And then your bank statement is going to have a beginning and ending balance. The beginning balance is given, and that really is the reconciled statement from the previous month. So the statement ending balance, you get off the statement, and I'm just going to say that that's $4,500. I'm just going to pick a number. And then the statement ending date. So let's say this is end of March. And it likes to have leading zeros or 4-digit years, or just to use the calendar. So when I start reconciling, what I'm going to see is all the transactions that are unreconciled in my bank account. And I need to get this difference to 0. And so when I look at my bank statement, I'm going to choose and click on all the items that are cleared till this is 0. And assuming everything's in there, it should get to 0. In fact, QuickBooks will automatically select items for you. And by the time you open this window, it might already be at 0. It gets good at doing this because it knows how to match all that stuff. If you can't get this to 0, there's a reason why. Is there something missing? Is there a number transposed? You need to figure that out. You don't want to force this to reconcile, even though you can. It'll let you finish now, but what will happen is it'll make a transaction entry in your checking account to reconcile the difference, and then it creates an account on your expense statement that says reconciliation discrepancies. So there's a red flag for you. If you have a reconciliation discrepancies and it's $10,000 at the end of the year, your accountant is going to have some questions for you. So you want to, if it's a transposition error and it's off 3 cents, okay, fine. You can force that kind of a reconciliation if you don't want to dig through the details. But if it's off by a very significant amount, you need to figure out why, because something's missing or something's entered wrong. And then you reconcile it, and it creates a little report for you that shows all the things that were reconciled, and it also shows at the bottom any transactions within QuickBooks that are not yet reconciled, which might be that outstanding check. So you may, even though you do most of your entry through the bank feed, you may want to make sure that, just check the checks that were, look at your check register. Hey, is there any checks that I wrote this month that aren't showing up here? I might want to enter that in QuickBooks so I have a record that it was actually written. Because what if it never does come through the bank? Then I have to do some more checking on that. All right. Okay. As usual. Oh my gosh. So for some reason, I thought I had till noon. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, here's the wrap up. And then I will answer any questions you have. So another, what close out of this? Another exercise for you is to go and look at the reports, which are right here. QuickBooks has standard reports. You can customize reports. You can save reports that you've customized. If there's standard reports that you like to look at a lot, you can favorite them. You can filter your reports to look at like this profit and loss by customer. Let's just say you only wanted to see, or not profit and loss by customer, you probably don't care so much about that, but like a customer aging report, who owes you money, that will break it out by months. Maybe you only want to see the ones that owe you money over 60 days. Or if you do a open invoices report, again, you might want to filter that by days. If you want to do a sales by customer report, maybe you want to just look at the customers that had over $1,000 of sales with you during a certain period. You can filter out all the others. So there's ways to look at the data in a more precise way with any report, and how you customize or filter that report will depend on the report. You probably don't want to filter your profit and loss. You probably want to see all of that data. But let's just take a look at what that profit and loss looks like quick. So it's going to default to this year to date, but this drop down window gives you all kinds of different standard reporting period. So this year, last year, last week, last month, last quarter, this week, this month, this quarter. So you shouldn't have to really put dates in here. If you just pick, well, this fiscal year to date is what we have. Let's just pick this month, and it'll automatically change the dates for you. Again, accrual is the default method, but you can change that. You also have display columns by. So let's just to say I can add, I want to display the columns in this monthly financial report to each week, or I could do a quarterly report and show each month. So it's a way to see the total data, but also to break it out. So there's all kinds of neat ways. And then you can also compare it to previous periods as well. I'm going to put it back to monthly just so it's a little easier to look at. Show you a few features here. Anytime there's a number, you can click on that number and see all the transactions within that number. Let's see. If I click on that number, it's sales by transaction. So I would expect to see invoices or sales receipts detailed out in this report once it thinks. Yeah, there's invoices from all these customers, what they bought for you. So that's where you can easily drill down. And that's why that description or memo is really important, because now it's a way to see at a high level, you know, a lot of detail without digging too deep. You can go back to the report summary up here. Anywhere you can see kind of the sub accounts, how they're layered like that. So let's say I just want to see job materials. I don't want to see that detail. Now you'll just see job materials for the total, with the total for landscaping. Maybe I don't care about services versus materials either. I just want to say landscaping altogether. So it's a way to clean up your report, particularly if you're providing it to an outside source, a lender or whatever. You can give them a more simplified report. They don't need the detail that you need. So there's a way to make it clean and simple. There's a way to drill down to the detail. Again, income statement shows total income minus the cost of your materials to get to your gross profit, so that you can see how much money you have to pay all the rest of your expenses and whether you end up with a net income or net loss. So take your time to look around at the reports, knowing that you can customize those reports and make them more to your liking. And if it's a customization that you will be doing over and over again, then save that customized report, give it a name, and then favorite it. And then it'll be in your favorites on your report list, and it'll be easier to find every time. At that, I'm going to be open to any questions. I'm happy to stay on the line a little longer if anybody has specific questions for their own business they want to address, or I can address questions in general. And just remember that we'll be sending out a recording of this following the session. So any questions in the chat?
We have a couple questions, Kelly. One question, can you assign a project when you send or pay an invoice?
It depends on what you mean by signing a project. QuickBooks has some job costing features, especially at the higher levels. You can create kind of sub accounts under a customer for different jobs, and assign it that way. Or you can just, if it's just something you're not want to really tie into your QuickBooks, but just put it on the invoice for the customer's use and for your, for the notation that it was for X project, you can do that in one of two ways. When you create the invoice, in the description of what you're charging them for products or services, you could put a project name in that description. It can be edited. Or you can create a custom field when you customize your invoice that says project, and then you could just put that in there on the invoice.
Next question, can you use undeposited funds for checks received but not taken to the bank, not tied to an invoice? For example, nonprofits receiving donations in the mail.
I would look at that one of two ways. For undeposited funds, you're only getting it there for something that comes through a customer transaction, so through an invoice or through a sales receipt. Beyond that, you just go straight to make a deposit, and you can tag a customer name there and enter it in. When you think about a nonprofit receiving donations in the mail, I mean, if you have a relationship with that donor, you could consider them as a customer. They're paying you for your services in a way. So if you wanted to set up a donor as a customer, you could use that same methodology. Or you can just go right to the direct. You can use that make deposit window, and you can tag a customer name there. You just don't keep as much detail as you would if you went through the invoice process over.
And one more question. You mentioned that tax is based on where clients receive the service. We often cross state lines and county lines. How should I figure out what the tax rate should be?
Within South Dakota, the taxing agency is the Department of Revenue, and they have a tax lookup function on their website. So you can type in any address in South Dakota and it will tell you what the tax rate is at that address. I would imagine other states have similar situations. If you're doing work in Iowa or Minnesota or Nebraska, if you're down in that southeast corner, you need to contact the revenue agents in those states. You may need to get a sales tax license for Nebraska if you're doing work in Nebraska. Remember, and I think you said auto care, Laramie, or something like that. If they're bringing you the vehicle to work on in your shop, then you charge the rate at your shop because that's where the work's being done. If you're going on site to do work at their location, then it's the rate of their location. So let's just say a customer from Iowa brings their vehicle to your shop to be fixed and you do the work there, you charge them the rate in your town if you're in Vermilion or whatever. And then they take the vehicle back across straight lines that you don't have to worry about charging them tax that way. So I think that answers the questions we had. Again, if anyone has any questions and wants to stay on the line, I'm happy to do so. I will turn it back over to Rachel to take us home here. Thanks for hanging with us.
All right. I'm back. Just wanted to say, can you see my screen? I can see. All right. Just want to say stay tuned for any future trainings. We do have a QR code that'll take you straight to the Grow website that shows all of our upcoming trainings and any past trainings. So there are recordings of those that go straight to our YouTube channel. Lots of good information on digital literacy, some Canva training, some marketing and AI and that kind of thing, cybersecurity as well. If you have any ideas for future topics that you want us to train on, let us know because we are all open ears on that and would love to have your feedback there. Keep your eye out for the follow-up email that will include a recording of today's training and then also a survey. If you wouldn't mind filling that out, that'd be great. That way we can get some good feedback and it'll help us for future trainings as well. And just want to say thank you again to all of our partners, First Financial Bank, Small Business Administration, the SBDC, and then Grow South Dakota. If you have any questions, you can contact Kelly Weaver. Here's her contact information. You can also contact me at the SBDC if you need any other technical assistance. But thanks again for joining us today, and hopefully we see you again at another future training. Thank you.